La incredible historia del ranchero, que volvió a vivir gracias, a viudas apache. He moved quietly among the cattle, checking each animal with care. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and every corner of it felt like a part of him. The smell of dry earth, the sound of rustling grass, the gentle lowing of the cows, it was a life that Manuel loved deeply. He had always been a quiet man, not one for crowds or parties. His days were long, filled with hard work, but there was peace in the routine. Tending the fields, fixing fences, leading the cattle to water, and repairing old equipment kept him busy, but he never complained. The hills and open skies were his companions, and in their quiet company he felt free. Sometimes, when he paused to watch the sunset from the porch of his small wooden house, he would think about how lucky he was to live a simple life. Yet, beneath the calm, Manuel often wondered if there was more to life than the ranch. He had lost his parents young, and he had no brothers or sisters. The land was his only family, and while it gave him comfort, it could not fill the emptiness that sometimes crept into his heart during long, lonely nights. On this particular morning, Manuel noticed something unusual. The wind had shifted. It carried a strange smell like smoke and dust mixed together. The animals were restless and the dogs barked in low tones he hadn't heard before. He paused, scanning the horizon. The hills that were normally serene seemed alive with a quiet tension. A small knot of fear tightened in his chest. He trusted his instincts. They had kept him safe more than once, but this time he wasn't sure what danger might come. The day went on as usual. Manuel moved from one task to another, repairing a broken fence near the corral. He hammered the posts with strong, practiced hands. Sweat dripped from his forehead, soaking the worn shirt on his back. The sun climbed higher and the ranch seemed to hum with the usual sounds. Birds calling to each other, the soft crunch of hooves on dry earth, and the whisper of wind through the grass. Yet every now and then, Manuel would pause, ears straining, heart quickening. There was a sense of unease in the air, a feeling he could not shake. By mid-afternoon, the first signs of trouble appeared. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose from the horizon. At first, Manuel thought it was just a herd of wild horses, but as the dust grew closer, he saw the shapes of men on horseback. Their movements were hurried and aggressive. A chill ran down his spine. He knew instantly they were bandits. Stories of attacks on ranches in nearby valleys had reached him before, and he had always hoped his isolated home would be spared. But now, there was no hope of avoiding them. Manuel ran back to the house, shouting to his dogs to guard the entrance. He grabbed the rifle he kept above the doorway, checking the bullets one by one. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded in his chest. He didn't have much time. The bandits would be here soon. As he prepared, he thought about his life, the simple beauty of his ranch, and the possibility that it could all end in an instant. Fear mixed with determination. He would protect his home, even if it cost him everything. The bandits arrived faster than he expected. They rode in a cloud of dust, shouting and waving their weapons. Manuel took his position behind the low wall near the entrance, peering over the edge. He fired a warning shot, trying to scare them away, but the men only laughed. They were bold and cruel, intent on taking what did not belong to them. Manuel's pulse raced as he took careful aim. He had faced danger before, but never like this, never with so many against him. A fight broke out. The sound of gunfire echoed across the valley, blending with the terrified cries of the animals. Manuel moved quickly, dodging and firing, doing everything he could to defend his home. The bandits were skilled, but Manuel knew the land better than anyone. He led them into narrow paths between the hills, hoping to slow them down. For a while, it seemed he might succeed. His body worked with precision and strength, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, but luck was not on his side. One of the bandits, faster than the others, managed to get close. Manuel tried to fend him off, but a sudden blow sent him tumbling to the ground. Pain exploded in his side, sharp and blinding. He gasped for breath, struggling to rise, but his body would not obey. The bandits moved on, taking what they wanted, leaving destruction in their wake. Manuel lay on the ground, his vision blurred, feeling the warm blood soaking his shirt. He thought this was the end. Time became strange. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun began its slow descent, turning the sky into a canvas of deep oranges and purples. Manuel's thoughts drifted. He thought of the life he might never live, the seasons of planting and harvest, the quiet evenings watching the sunset, the sound of rain on the roof. Regret and longing filled him, but he also felt a strange calm. He had lived honestly, worked hard, and loved the land. Perhaps that was enough. As darkness approached, Manuel's body grew weaker. He could barely move, and every breath was a battle. He tried to call for help, but his voice was too faint. The stars began to appear overhead, sparkling in the vast night sky. For the first time in many days, Manuel felt the world around him in silence. The wind whispered through the grass, the night animals stirred, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. He was alone, yet he felt connected to the earth, to the land he loved so deeply. In the darkness, Manuel thought of his parents and ancestors. He imagined their faces, smiling at him with pride. He remembered stories his father had told him about resilience, courage, and hope. Somehow, those stories gave him strength. He knew he could not give up, even if his body ached and his mind was clouded with pain. Somewhere out there, someone might come. Perhaps the world had not forgotten him yet. As he drifted between consciousness and the edge of sleep, he noticed a faint sound, a soft rustling different from the wind or animals. It grew louder, deliberate, and careful. Manuel opened his eyes, straining to see through the dim light. At first, he thought it was a dream, but then he saw shadows moving toward him. 4 figures, tall and graceful, emerged from the darkness. They were women, their faces determined and kind, their eyes filled with a quiet strength. Manuel's heart quickened. Who were they? And why had they come? The women approached slowly, speaking in soft voices that Manuel could not fully understand. They carried bundles of herbs and blankets. Without hesitation, they set to work, carefully tending to his wounds. Manuel tried to speak, to thank them, but his throat was dry and weak. He could only watch in awe as they worked, their hands skillful and sure. The night grew deep, but the women did not leave. They stayed with him, tending to his injuries, keeping him warm and whispering words of comfort. Manuel realized that he was no longer alone. For the first time since the attack, hope began to stir in his heart. He did not know who these women were or why they had chosen to help him, but their presence gave him strength. Perhaps, he thought, life was not finished with him yet. As Manuel closed his eyes, exhausted but alive, he felt a flicker of something he had not felt in years. Trust. Trust that even in the darkest moments there were people, or perhaps fate itself, that could bring light and healing. And with that thought, he allowed himself to drift into a deep, peaceful sleep, unaware that this night would mark the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. Manuel woke slowly, feeling the softness of blankets around him and the warmth of a small fire crackling nearby. His body ached less than the night before, though pain still ran like fire through his side. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light of dawn, he noticed the 4 women sitting near him, quietly tending to the fire and preparing a simple breakfast. They moved with a calm confidence that both surprised and comforted him. At first, Manuel was cautious. He had spent the night hurt and vulnerable, and now he found himself in the presence of strangers. But there was something in their eyes, kindness, strength, and a quiet wisdom, that made him trust them despite himself. He tried to speak, his voice hoarse from the previous night. Who are you?" he asked, his words slow and careful. One of the women, slightly taller than the others with long dark hair, smiled gently. She pointed to her chest and then to Manuel, using simple gestures that seemed easy to understand. Manuel realized that she was introducing herself without words, and the other women followed, each giving him a small, respectful nod. It was clear they were not ordinary travelers. They carried a quiet authority, a sense of purpose, and Manuel could feel the strength that came from a lifetime of experience. As the day passed, Manuel learned a little about these women. They were widows of Apache warriors who had lived through countless hardships and losses. Each had her own story, though none spoke much of pain. Instead, they focused on survival, wisdom, and the strength to keep moving forward. They had been traveling together, following the rhythms of the land when they stumbled upon Manuel, injured and alone. Seeing him as someone in need, they chose to help. The women's skills were remarkable. They knew the plants around the ranch as if they were old friends. Leaves, roots, and flowers became medicine in their hands. Manuel watched as they crushed herbs into pastes and brewed teas that smelled of the earth itself. They cleaned his wounds with care, wrapping them in soft, clean cloths. Every movement was deliberate, confident, and gentle. He had never seen such knowledge and precision, and it made him feel both humble and grateful. Over the next few days, Manuel began to regain strength. The pain in his side lessened, and he could sit up without feeling faint. The women encouraged him to eat, preparing simple meals from dried grains, fresh herbs, and whatever vegetables they could find nearby. He was amazed at how satisfying their food was, not because of flavor alone, but because of the care that went into preparing it. Each meal felt like a reminder that he was alive and that someone cared enough to help him. During this time, Manuel also learned about their lives. They spoke sparingly, but when they did, their words painted vivid pictures of their pasts. One woman spoke of her husband, a brave warrior who had died protecting their village. Another shared stories of traveling across difficult terrain after losing her family to disease. A third spoke of the challenges of raising children alone, and the fourth of learning to survive in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Each story carried a lesson, a memory of resilience, and a quiet determination to keep living. Manuel felt a mix of awe and admiration. These women who had suffered so much were still capable of compassion, generosity, and kindness. Their presence was more than just helpful, it was inspiring. He realized that he had spent most of his life thinking survival was a solitary endeavor, that each person could only rely on themselves. But watching these women care for him, he began to understand the power of community, trust, and shared strength. Days turned into weeks. Manuel continued to heal, physically and emotionally. He found himself listening closely to the women, learning not only about their world but about his own. He learned which plants could heal wounds, how to find water in unexpected places, and how to read the land for signs of danger. More importantly, he learned patience, humility, and gratitude. The women never rushed him. They let him recover at his own pace, never pressing, never judging. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection. Manuel would sit by the fire while the women prepared their own meals or mended their belongings. Sometimes they would hum softly, singing songs of their ancestors, stories woven into melodies that seemed to stretch across time. Manuel listened, feeling the rhythm of life in a way he never had before. The songs were not just music, they were lessons, memories, and a connection to a past that Manuel could only imagine. Despite his growing trust, Manuel could not ignore the questions in his mind. Why had these women chosen to help him? What had drawn them to this remote place? And most importantly, what did this mean for his future? He realized that he could not survive alone, not truly. The bond he was forming with these women was changing something deep inside him. He began to see that life was not simply about survival or work. It was about connection, kindness, and learning from those who had more experience than oneself. As Manuel regained his strength, he also began to contribute. He helped the women gather water, chop firewood, and care for the small garden they had started near the ranch. Though his movements were slow at first, he soon found joy in being useful again. The act of giving back, even in small ways, strengthened his sense of purpose. He realized that life was not just about receiving help, it was about participating in the shared experience of caring and surviving together. There were moments of quiet laughter as well. Manuel would tell small stories of life on the ranch, the animals he had cared for, and the simple routines that had shaped his days. The women listened, occasionally teasing him in gentle ways, their smiles softening the lines of hardship on their faces. These moments, though brief, created a sense of normalcy and belonging that Manuel had not felt in years. He began to feel that he was part of something larger, something beyond himself and his ranch. One afternoon, Manuel noticed how attentive the women were to the signs of nature around them. They could tell when the weather would change, where animals were hiding, and when it was safe to travel. Their connection to the land was profound. Manuel had always loved his ranch, but he realized that he had only ever seen it from the surface. These women taught him to observe, to respect, and to listen to the subtle messages of the earth. He felt a new sense of wonder, a renewed appreciation for the place he had always called home. By the end of the second week, Manuel was able to walk longer distances without help. He still felt the pain in his side, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything, but he also felt alive in a way he had not before. The women's presence had given him not only life but perspective. They had shown him that help could come from unexpected places, and that trust, once given, could heal both body and soul. Manuel began to think about the future. He did not know what would come next, but he felt ready to face it. He realized that he could no longer live in isolation, relying only on himself. Life had taught him a lesson in humility and gratitude. The women had not just healed his wounds, they had opened his heart to the possibility of connection, friendship, and the courage to continue living fully. As night fell, Manuel sat by the fire once more, watching the stars appear in the sky. The four women worked quietly, tending to small tasks, their movements precise and calm. Manuel felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, he felt that he was part of something meaningful. He had survived the attack, yes, but more importantly, he had survived with the help of others, learning the value of trust, patience, and compassion. And though he did not yet know the full story that the future would hold, Manuel understood one truth clearly. His life had been changed forever, not just by survival, but by the kindness and wisdom of four remarkable women who had chosen to help a stranger in need. Their paths had crossed at a moment of crisis, and from that moment, Manuel's life would never be the same. As the days turned into weeks, Manuel felt his strength returning. Each morning he woke with a little more energy, and the pain in his side, though still present, became more bearable. The four women moved around the ranch with ease, their actions fluid and confident, and Manuel found himself following their lead, learning from the way they navigated the land and cared for the animals. He had never imagined that healing could feel so much like learning, so much like discovering a new life within his own. The women were patient teachers. They showed him how to identify plants that could heal, which herbs could soothe pain, and which roots could cleanse the body of illness. They also taught him simple exercises to rebuild his muscles, beginning with short walks and slowly increasing to longer treks across the hills. Each day, Manuel felt a little stronger, a little more capable. More than that, he felt a new confidence growing inside him, the kind that comes from knowing he had survived not just the bandits' attack, but the fragile moments that followed when survival seemed uncertain. One afternoon, while they worked together in the garden, one of the women, her hair tied back with a simple cloth, paused to show Manuel a small plant with green leaves and tiny white flowers. She crushed a leaf between her fingers, letting the fragrance fill the air, and gestured for him to smell it. Then, with a small smile, she pressed it gently against his bruised side. Manuel felt the cool relief spread through him almost immediately. "You see," she said softly, pointing to the plant again. Her voice was calm and measured, but there was an authority in it that made Manuel listen closely. He realized that she was not just healing him physically. She was teaching him to respect the wisdom of the land, to see it as more than just soil and rocks. It was alive, capable of giving, nurturing, and protecting, if one knew how to understand it. During these quiet moments, Manuel also began to learn about the women's lives. They did not share everything, but in the fragments they offered, he glimpsed courage, resilience, and deep sorrow. One woman spoke of losing her husband to a rival tribe, another of surviving a fire that destroyed her village, a third of raising children alone while wandering through harsh terrain, and the fourth of learning to hunt and heal from her elders. Each story was a lesson, a thread in a tapestry of experience that Manuel began to understand as both wisdom and survival. Manuel realized that life had given him an unexpected chance, to learn not just to survive, but to truly live. These women, who had suffered much more than he had chosen to give him strength without asking for anything in return. Their presence was a reminder that life could be generous, that help could come in the most unexpected ways, and that human kindness had the power to heal both body and soul. As Manuel regained his strength, he also began to help the women in more meaningful ways. He repaired fences that had been damaged during the bandits' attack, carried water from the stream to the garden, and tended the animals alongside them. He had always worked hard on his ranch, but now his labor felt different. It was not just duty, it was a shared effort, a collaboration that connected him to the women and to the land in ways he had never known. Each small task, whether gathering firewood or planting seeds, became an act of gratitude and partnership. Evenings were a time of reflection and quiet learning. Manuel would sit by the fire while the women performed their evening routines, mending clothes, preparing simple meals, and singing soft songs of their ancestors. These songs, though unfamiliar, resonated deep within him. He could sense the stories they carried, the hardships, victories, and memories that had shaped their lives. Sometimes he tried to hum along and the women would smile, encouraging him gently. In these moments, Manuel felt a connection that went beyond words, a bond of trust, respect, and shared experience. One morning, Manuel decided to explore the hills near the ranch. He walked carefully, using the skills he had learned from the women to navigate the rough terrain. He noticed small signs of wildlife, tracks in the dirt, and subtle changes in the plants that indicated water nearby. The experience was exhilarating. He realized that he had been so focused on survival and routine that he had never truly observed the world around him. Now, with the guidance of the women, he saw the hills, the streams, and the forests in a new light. Every detail mattered, every moment was a lesson, and every step reminded him of his own resilience. Manuel's bond with the women deepened as the weeks passed. They laughed together, shared small stories, and supported one another in their work. Their companionship brought warmth to his days, a comfort he had not felt in years. He began to understand that survival alone was not enough. Life required trust, connection, and mutual support. The women had not just saved his body. They had healed his heart, teaching him that vulnerability was not weakness, but a bridge to deeper understanding and courage. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the ranch, Manuel found himself speaking more openly than ever before. He told the women about his childhood, growing up on the ranch without his parents, learning to work the land alone, and feeling the quiet loneliness that had followed him for years. The women listened with patience, offering gentle nods and quiet encouragement. Their presence allowed him to open his heart, to share fears and hopes he had kept buried for too long. The women, in turn, shared lessons without speaking directly. Their actions, the way they tended the animals, the careful attention to every detail of the ranch, taught Manuel humility, patience, and diligence. He began to see that healing was more than medicine. It was a way of living, a way of observing, understanding, and respecting the world around him. Each day brought new discoveries, small triumphs, and moments of gratitude. Manuel also began to notice subtle changes in himself. He felt stronger, more capable, and more confident. The fear that had haunted him since the bandit attack was slowly replaced by hope and determination. He realized that life could be fragile, but it could also be rich and full when shared with those who cared. The women had given him not only life but a renewed sense of purpose. He wanted to honor that gift by living fully, by being present, and by contributing to their shared life on the ranch. As the weeks continued, Manuel grew more attuned to the rhythm of the land. He learned when to plant, when to harvest, and how to anticipate changes in weather. The women's guidance taught him to read the subtle signs of nature, to understand that survival required observation, patience, and respect. Each day he felt more connected to the ranch, more at home, and more aware of the delicate balance of life around him. Manuel also learned about resilience, not just physical strength, but emotional endurance. Watching the women navigate their own losses, he understood that life would always bring challenges, but it was how one responded that defined a person. He began to see that courage was not only facing danger but also embracing vulnerability, seeking help when needed, and trusting in others. The women had embodied that courage, and through their guidance, Manuel was learning to embody it himself. By the end of this period, Manuel was almost fully recovered. He could walk long distances, tend the ranch, and even manage small tasks on his own. Yet he knew that he had not achieved this alone. The four women had been his guides, his teachers, and his companions. Their wisdom, patience, and compassion had transformed him, giving him not only life but the tools to live it fully. As night fell, Manuel sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the changes he had experienced. He thought about the attack, the pain, and the fear he had endured. But more importantly, he thought about the gift of trust, kindness, and human connection that the women had offered him. He understood that life had given him a second chance, and he vowed to honor it, not just by surviving, but by embracing the lessons he had learned. And as the fire crackled and the stars shone overhead, Manuel felt a sense of peace he had never known. He was no longer the lonely rancher who had faced death alone. He was a man who had learned the true meaning of resilience, trust, and hope, and who had discovered that life, even after the darkest moments, could still be beautiful, rich, and full of unexpected friendship. Life at the ranch had begun to feel steady again. Manuel moved with confidence, tending the animals and repairing fences with ease. The four women had become a part of his daily life, their quiet strength and wisdom now deeply ingrained in every corner of the ranch. The hills that had once seemed lonely now felt alive with possibility, and Manuel felt a sense of peace he had not experienced in years. Yet peace, Manuel knew, could be fragile. He had survived the bandit attack before, but the memory of that day lingered in his mind. He was vigilant, always listening to the wind, always watching the horizon. The lessons the women had taught him went beyond healing and survival. They had shown him the importance of observation, patience, and preparation. One late afternoon, as Manuel was guiding a herd of cattle back toward the corral, he noticed a dust cloud rising far off on the horizon. At first, he hoped it was nothing, a group of travelers or perhaps wild horses. But as the figures drew nearer, his heart sank. It was a group of bandits, more numerous than the last time, their movements aggressive and determined. Manuel felt a sharp pang of fear, but he pushed it aside. He was no longer the weak man who had been left for dead. He was stronger, wiser, and he had allies. Manuel hurried back to the house, calling the women to gather. They had already sensed the approaching danger. Their instincts, honed through years of hardship, were sharp and unerring. Without a word, they began preparing, organizing the supplies and setting small traps along the paths leading to the ranch. Manuel followed their instructions carefully, feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. He understood now that survival was not just about strength, it was about strategy, teamwork, and trust. The bandits arrived with the sun dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Their shouts echoed through the valley, a mix of menace and excitement. Manuel positioned himself behind the low wall near the entrance, rifle in hand, while the women moved with quiet precision, placing obstacles and guiding the bandits into narrow paths where they could be managed. The air was tense, filled with anticipation and the sounds of the approaching threat. The first skirmish was chaotic. The bandits charged forward, shouting and brandishing their weapons. Manuel fired warning shots, aiming carefully, while the women used their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the attackers. Their movements were fluid, practiced, and incredibly effective. Manuel marveled at their courage and skill, realizing that their experience had prepared them for this moment in ways he could only begin to understand. Despite their preparation, the bandits were relentless. They attempted to surround the ranch, forcing Manuel and the women to adapt quickly. The air was filled with tension, each moment a test of courage and quick thinking. Manuel's heart raced, but he focused on the lessons he had learned, the importance of patience, the need to observe, and the power of trust. He realized that he was no longer alone. The women were not just his protectors, they were his partners, and together they were strong. One of the women, with sharp eyes and steady hands, led Manuel to a hidden path behind the ranch. From there, they could observe the bandits without being seen, anticipating their movements and planning their next actions. Manuel felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. These women had not only saved his life once, they were now teaching him how to protect what mattered most. Their guidance was precise, and their courage was unwavering. The battle continued into the evening. The bandits were clever, but Manuel and the women were cleverer. They used the terrain to their advantage, leading the attackers into areas where they could be slowed down or trapped. Manuel found himself thinking and acting in ways he never had before. He was alert, decisive, and coordinated, working seamlessly with the women as if they had been together for years. The fear that had once paralyzed him was now replaced by determination and focus. At one critical moment, a bandit managed to break through the outer defenses, charging toward the corral where Manuel had positioned himself. Manuel braced himself, heart pounding, and took careful aim. The bandit faltered, surprised by the quick response and precision of Manuel's actions. Simultaneously, one of the women intercepted from the side, using her agility and experience to force the intruder back. The coordinated effort was seamless, a testament to the trust and understanding that had grown between them over the past weeks. As darkness fully descended, the bandits realized that they were outmatched. Their shouts grew frantic and they began to retreat, leaving the ranch intact. Manuel and the women stood together, exhausted but victorious. The air was thick with relief, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter as if acknowledging their success. Manuel felt a deep sense of pride, not just in himself, but in the women who had taught him so much about courage, strategy, and resilience. After the danger had passed, Manuel walked through the ranch, checking each area for damage. The women followed quietly, their presence comforting and reassuring. Though they had been through another threat, they showed no fear, no hesitation. Manuel realized that their strength was not just physical, but mental and emotional. They had faced hardship before, and this challenge, though significant, was another test that they met with grace and skill. As the night settled over the hills, Manuel sat by the fire with the women, reflecting on the events of the day. He spoke quietly, sharing his thoughts and gratitude. "I never imagined I could face something like this and survive," he said. "But I have learned so much from you all. You have shown me that courage is not just about strength, it is about trust, planning, and working together. You have given me a gift I will never forget." The women listened, their expressions calm but warm. They did not speak much, but their eyes conveyed understanding and encouragement. Manuel felt a deep sense of connection, realizing that their bond had grown stronger through the shared experience of facing danger together. He understood now that life was not just about surviving alone, it was about trusting others, working together, and using knowledge and wisdom to navigate challenges. In the days that followed, life at the ranch returned to a more peaceful rhythm. The bandit attack had tested them, but it had also strengthened the trust and bond between Manuel and the women. Manuel continued to work on the ranch, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and maintaining the land, but he did so with a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced danger and survived, not through luck alone, but through courage, strategy, and the support of the women who had saved him. The women, in turn, continued to teach Manuel, not just about survival, but about life. They showed him how to read the signs of nature, how to anticipate challenges, and how to care for both the land and the people who relied on it. Manuel absorbed these lessons eagerly, understanding that each day brought new opportunities to learn, grow, and become stronger. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Manuel reflected on everything he had experienced. He thought about the attack, the fear, the pain, and the courage it had taken to survive. But more than that, he thought about the women who had guided him, taught him, and shared their strength. He realized that life had given him not just a second chance, but a chance to become a better person, to live with wisdom, courage, and compassion. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, Manuel felt a profound sense of gratitude. He was no longer the man who had faced death alone on his ranch. He was a man who had learned the true meaning of courage, resilience, and trust. He had discovered that life, even in the face of danger, could be filled with connection, support, and the extraordinary strength that comes from standing together with those who care. The days after the bandit attack were quiet, but Manuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He walked through his ranch with careful steps, inspecting the fences, the animals, and the fields. The damage from the attack was minor, but the experience had left its mark on him. He realized that life could change in an instant, and the only way to live fully was to embrace each day with courage, care, and gratitude. The four women, who had become his steadfast companions, continued their work alongside him. They moved through the ranch with quiet determination, their presence a source of strength and reassurance. Manuel watched them closely, noticing the small details. The way one would tend to a wounded animal with patience, the way another could find water in the driest areas, the way the others carefully repaired tools or prepared food. Their skills were impressive, but their kindness and wisdom were even more remarkable. Manuel began to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. Just a few weeks ago, he had been on the brink of death, left alone and injured after a violent attack. Now, he was not only alive but stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who cared for him. He realized that the four women had done more than heal his wounds. They had given him a second chance at life, teaching him lessons that would last forever. With his health restored, Manuel took on more responsibility around the ranch. He tended the fields, repaired broken fences, and helped care for the animals, but now he did so with the confidence of a man who had faced death and survived. Each task, no matter how small, felt meaningful. He worked with the women, learning new ways to approach each problem, and together they made the ranch flourish. Manuel felt a sense of pride that came not from personal achievement alone, but from shared effort, trust, and teamwork. As the weeks passed, Manuel began to think beyond the daily tasks of survival. He realized that his life had been limited before, confined to the routines of work and isolation. Now, He felt the urge to give back, to share what he had learned with others. He started to make small improvements around the ranch, creating spaces for animals to rest, planting additional crops, and organizing tools in ways that made work easier and more efficient. The ranch was not just a home anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, hope, and new beginnings. The women, too, had grown closer to Manuel. Their bond was no longer just one of healer and patient. It had become a partnership, a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Manuel learned more from them each day, not just about survival, but about life itself. They showed him the importance of patience, the power of observation, and the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. Manuel felt fortunate to have encountered such remarkable individuals who had not only saved his life, but had also changed it forever. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Manuel sat by the fire with the women. The sky glowed in shades of orange and pink, and the air was calm and warm. He looked at the faces around him, each marked by experience, hardship, and wisdom. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and humility. "I don't know how I can ever repay you," he said softly. "You've given me a second chance, not just to live, but to understand life in ways I never knew before." The women smiled, their expressions calm and serene. They did not need thanks, Manuel realized. Their gift was not about recognition or reward. It was about the simple act of helping another human being, of offering compassion and strength when it was needed most. Manuel understood that this was a lesson in itself, that life was richer when shared, that kindness could heal more than wounds, and that trust could create bonds stronger than any hardship. As weeks turned into months, Manuel's life began to settle into a steady rhythm. The ranch flourished under his care and the guidance of the women. Crops grew tall and healthy, animals thrived, and the home itself felt alive with warmth and purpose. Manuel's confidence grew with each passing day, and he found himself taking initiative in ways he had never done before. He repaired old structures, built new fences, and even created small areas for wildlife to take shelter. Each improvement was a testament to his dedication and the lessons he had learned from the women who had saved him. But the greatest change was not in the ranch itself. It was in Manuel. He had transformed from a man who lived in isolation, cautious and solitary, into someone capable of trust, courage, and deep connection. He had learned that life was fragile, yet full of opportunity, and that the strength of the human spirit often lay in the willingness to accept help, learn from others, and embrace both joy and hardship. The women, in turn, continued to guide him. They taught him more about the land, about the plants, the animals, and the cycles of nature. They showed him how to anticipate the weather, how to preserve food, and how to live in harmony with the earth. Manuel absorbed each lesson eagerly, realizing that their knowledge was not just practical, it was a way of understanding life itself. One morning, as Manuel walked through the fields, he noticed the signs of change in the seasons. The air was crisp, the grass green and healthy, and the animals strong and well-fed. He felt a sense of pride but also humility. He had survived, yes, but he had survived because of others, the women who had given him life, knowledge, and hope. He realized that life was a shared journey, and that the people who walked alongside you could shape your path in ways you never imagined. Manuel began to think about the future in ways he had never done before. He wanted to expand the ranch, create spaces for others to find shelter and safety, and help travelers or neighbors who might be in need. The lessons he had learned from the women inspired him to become more than just a rancher. He wanted to be a guide, a protector, and a source of strength for those who needed it, just as they had been for him. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection. Manuel would sit by the fire, watching the stars appear one by one, and think about the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the bandit attack, the pain and the fear, but he also thought about the women who had transformed his life. They had taught him that true strength was not measured by what one could endure alone, but by how one could connect, trust, and support others. One night, as the wind rustled through the trees and the fire crackled softly, Manuel realized something profound. Life was not just about survival, nor was it solely about work or routine. Life was about connection, learning, and the courage to embrace both the challenges and the joys it offered. He understood that his journey with the women had changed him in ways that would last forever. He had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to truly understand the meaning of living. As the stars shone brightly over the hills, Manuel looked around at the women who had become his teachers, companions, and friends. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and love. Their presence had not only saved his life, but it had also opened his heart to the beauty, strength, and wisdom of the world. He knew that he would never forget them, nor the lessons they had imparted. In the months that followed, Manuel fully restored his ranch. The animals thrived, the fields produced bountiful crops, and the home was warm and welcoming. But beyond the physical improvements, Manuel's life had been transformed. He had learned resilience, trust, patience, and the value of human connection. He had discovered that courage was not only facing danger but also embracing life fully, with all its uncertainties and possibilities. The four women remained a part of his life, guiding him, teaching him, and sharing their wisdom. Together, they built a life that was richer, stronger, and more meaningful than Manuel had ever imagined. He had been given a second chance, and he vowed to live it fully, honoring the women who had changed his life and the lessons they had taught him. As the sun rose over the hills one morning, Manuel stood on the porch of his home, looking out at the land he loved. The ranch was alive with the sounds of animals, the rustling of grass, and the gentle movements of the women who had become his family. He felt a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that he had not only survived but had grown, learned, and embraced life in a way he never had before. And so, Manuel's story came full circle. From the brink of death, he had been saved by four remarkable women whose courage, wisdom, and kindness had given him a second chance. His life was forever changed, and he carried with him the lessons of resilience, trust, and gratitude. The ranch was not just a home. It was a testament to the strength of human connection, the power of compassion, and the extraordinary ways in which life can offer hope, even after the darkest moments.